Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We shall hear from a section of Srimad Bhagavatam in the 9th canto, the downfall of Saubhari Muni. I wondered, I was going back and forth about this section of the Bhagavatam in terms of whether to focus on it, but there's something intriguing about this whole history of Saubhari Muni. In that it's a lesson about material desires. And he had them in a big way, and he could fulfill them in a big way. And then comes lamentation as he concludes, I'll never be materially satisfied. So it's quite a dramatic lesson, even though it's about a society that is far more advanced than what we have today. And you might wonder why this is in Srimad Bhagavatam. As you read Srimad Bhagavatam, you more and more come to the conclusion that its existence and its rationale is beyond our conceptions. In other words, instead of making Srimad Bhagavatam conform to our concepts, by reading Srimad Bhagavatam submissively, gradually your consciousness becomes purified. And indeed you realize that you're dealing with the literary incarnation of the Supreme Personality Godhead. The histories, the accounts can seem quite exotic, especially they're interplanetary and beyond this universe. But as we read, we notice we're becoming purified. Perhaps you've noticed that on a day when you're harassed by anxieties and material thoughts and desires, just by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, plunging yourself into a whole chapter, you're like a new person. And you begin to wonder, well, this is mystical. Everyone needs that experience. Just like I mentioned about Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. Everyone needs their personal victory in chanting Hare Krishna. A personal experience in which you can see that you can conquer over the attacks of the illusory energy by chanting Hare Krishna. Once you have that experience, it's always there in your filing cabinet, so to speak. And in your darkest hours, you remember, I, in the past, transcended by chanting Hare Krishna. Why don't I do it again? So, Srimad Bhagavatam is like that. Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting Hare Krishna. These are our transcendental strengths and nourishers. Even a beginner notices that Srimad Bhagavatam has some kind of charm to it, some kind of otherworldly charm. And that's because Srimad Bhagavatam can instill in your heart transcendental rasa, the flavors of love of Krishna. Even in the beginning stages of bhakti, there's a trace of love for Krishna, Krishna prema. And as you deepen your relationship with Srimad Bhagavatam by service, and especially by serving and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees, more and more the transcendental reality becomes clearer for you. That means you're making spiritual advancement. And that spiritual advancement is priceless. It's the real wealth. Getting an affinity, an affectionate affinity for Srimad Bhagavatam is real career development. So I thought about this section of Bhagavatam. It deals with mystic powers. It deals with material desires. It deals with persons far beyond the caliber of human beings today. Turning on or off? Off. Thank you. First of all, you hear about Mandata, an emperor not of one town or small country or even one continent. He was powerful enough to be the emperor of the entire planet and didn't need any subordinates. This may seem, as we often explain, mythological to you. How could one person be that powerful and that competent? That's because in this darkness of the age of Kali, if you find someone who can just manage one little city, you think, oh, what a great leader. So the standards have sunk so low today, and therefore, when we hear about persons with extraordinary powers, we think, oh, that must be a myth. So Mandata had 3 sons, one of whom is the famous Muchakunda in Krishna Lila. Muchakunda is described by Shukadeva Goswami as a great mystic yogi. But he was also a king, a chief executive. And you know his presentation to Krishna. He described himself in such an unforgettable way. I was so powerful a ruler. His 2 statements about himself I remember the most. I forgot about time, but time did not forget about me. At the appropriate moment, like a black snake gobbling up a mouse, time struck. What was the other thing he said? During the day, I'm such a powerful ruler. Subordinate kings bow down at my feet, crashing their helmets to the floor at my feet. But what happens at night? At night, I have to go to the chamber of my queens and grovel on the floor, begging. So he's the son of Mandata. The Mandata had, besides 3 sons, he had 50 daughters. And that leads us to Saubhari Muni. But first, I wanted to read some verses by Sanatana Goswami from Sri Krishna Lila Stava in a section called Srimad Bhagavata Mahima Stotram, praise of the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can always remember what we're dealing with. We're dealing with subject matter beyond mundane conception and beyond mundane desires. We're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam on the authority of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who said that before you're liberated, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, And after you are liberated, go on hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. We're chanting Hare Krishna. We're pursuing love of Krishna as the ultimate goal of life. We're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam on the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srila Sanatana Goswami writes in praise of Srimad Bhagavatam, O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths. You are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees. O Master, Srimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. I bow down to you, who are supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. We hold such prayers on our head and aspire to develop just a particle of that kind of realization and appreciation for Srimad Bhagavatam. So hearing that, let's go to the 9th canto and try to understand Saubhari Muni and his predicament. He is an extraordinarily powerful mystic yogi. And he's performing austerities submerged constantly in the Yamuna River. He can live underwater by his mystic power. Now, why was he underwater? Because he didn't want to be disturbed in his mystic meditation. He wanted to avoid the general population. And also, by being underwater, it's an austerity, and so that increases the mystic power. In order to get something, you always have to give something in this world. So there's always some austerity no matter what you do. Any pursuit, educational, financial, relationship, any pursuit always requires some austerity. That means going through some inconvenience, tolerating some pains to reach a particular goal. You go to school because you want the qualification, so you tolerate. You go to work because you want the money. You take the risk of relationships because you don't want to be alone. You want to feel the reciprocation and companionship. So you tolerate the misunderstandings. You tolerate the potential for heartbreak. So whatever you do, there's always some austerity involved. Saubhari Muni's austerity was on a different level, deep in the water of the river Yamuna. We'll chant text Yamunantājale magnas Tapyamana parantapaha Nivrittim mina rajasya Jistamaituna dharminaha Jata spriho nirpam vipra Kanyam ekam ayachata Sopyaha griyatam brahman Kamam kanya swayamvare Yamunanta jale magnas Tapyamana parantapaha Nivrittim mina rajasya Drishtva maituna dharminaha Jata spriham nirpam vipra Kanyam ekam ayachata Sopyaha griyatam brahman Kamam kanya swayamvare
Yamunantājale magnas Tapyamana param tapaha Nivrittim rajasya Drishtva maituna dharminaha Jata spriho nirpam vipra Kanyam ekam ayachata Sopyaha griyatam brahman Kamam kanya swayamvare
Vaishnavis. Yamuna Antajale. In the deep water of the river Yamuna. Magna. Merged completely. Tapyamana. Executing austerity. Param. Nivrittim, pleasure. Minarajasya, of a big fish. Drishtva, seeing. Maituna dharmina, engaged in sexual affairs. Jata spriha, became sexually inclined. Nripam, unto the king. Mandata, Vipra, the Brahmana. Saubhari Rishi, Kanyamekam, one daughter. Ayachata, begged for. Sa, he, the king. Api, also. Aha, said. Griyatam, you can take. Brahman, O Brahmana. Kamam, as she desires. Kanya, daughter. Swayambare, a personal selection. Translation. Saubhari Rishi was engaged in austerity, deep in the water of the river Yamuna, when he saw a pair of fish engaged in sexual affairs. Thus he perceived the pleasure of sex life, and induced by this desire, he went to King Mandata and begged for one of the king's daughters. In response to this request, the king said, O Brahmana, any of my daughters may accept any husband according to her personal selection. Purple. This is the beginning of the story of Saubhari Rishi. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Mandata was the king of Mathura, and Saubhari Rishi was engaged in austerity while submerged deep within the river Yamuna. When the Rishi felt sexual desire, he emerged from the water and went to King Mandata to ask that one of the king's daughters become his wife. Om Gana Chavanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurandritam Yena Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So some questions. Why is he performing such great austerities? Why did he want to marry one of the king's daughters? And what was their reaction to someone asking for marriage who looked like they had been and smelled like they had been meditating under the water for quite a long time? So we talked briefly about how Saubhari Rishi, typical of a mystic yogi, wanted to avoid the general population so he could develop his mystic powers unhindered. Even today in India, when they have a great gathering like the Meghmala or Meghmela, Kumbh Mela, down from the Himalayas, out from the caves in remote areas, come so many mystic yogis, and some of them have been alive for hundreds of years. They just come for these special events to bathe at the confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna. By that austerity that Saubhari Rishi is doing, and we spoke about how whatever you do in this world, there has to be austerity first. You don't get any free lunches. You don't get any free ride in the material world. Everything requires some expenditure of energy, some risking, some going out on a limb. So Saubhari Muni was developing extraordinary mystic powers, and you'll hear about how he fulfill his material desires. What happened? There he is underwater. And then he happens to see some fish reproducing, engaged in reproductive activity. And his mind becomes disturbed. He was not sufficiently engaged in bhakti, therefore his desires were not linked to Krishna's desires. This is something even a new bhakti yogi learns, that you can't extinguish desire, you have to purify desire and connect your desire to Krishna's pleasure. You can't artificially rid yourself of desire or ignore desire. Bhakti is all about desiring for the pleasure of Krishna. So Saubhari Muni, although developing extraordinary mystic powers, obviously hadn't solved the desire riddle. So much so that just by seeing some fish engaged in bodily affairs, Saubhari Muni's mind became disturbed. Now, what do you think what about these days? You may wonder, how does anyone stand a chance these days? Seeing some fish engaged in reproductive activity is nothing compared to what's happening on every street corner these days. What's happening on your smartphone, on your laptop. I explained before how it has been ascertained that in terms of the most powerful IT enterprises in the world that affect the whole world, impact the whole world, number one is Facebook. No surprise to you. Number two is Google. Number four is Apple. But what's number three? Pornhub. Count yourself fortunate if you don't know what Pornhub is. It's the number three most impactful IT enterprise in terms of affecting people's lives in the whole world. Is it located? Is its headquarters in Ottawa? It's Canadian. It's in one Canadian city. I think it's Montreal. They have a flash building in Montreal. So, seeing two fish is nothing compared to what you see these days, when agitation saturates the whole atmosphere. And sometimes it seems like the bhakti yogis are making a futile struggle, trying to control their senses, keep their bhakti life together, trying to keep their senses from going out of control. But we have the bhakti yoga process, which is sufficient to protect us if we know how to take shelter of it. Taking shelter of the bhakti process means engaging desire in Krishna's service. And the best way to do that is by taking Krishna's desires as our desires. In that way, we're truly holistic. Why did Saubhari Muni have this problem? First of all, as we discussed, he was not properly situated in bhakti. He was a mystic yogi, developing mystic powers for his own aggrandizement, for his own personal power. But there was another reason for his weakness. He had offended a Vaishnava who Who was that Vaishnava? Garuda, the carrier, the bird carrier of Lord Vishnu. Garuda likes to eat fish. And so he was coming to the river to get some fish. That's his natural diet as a bird. Still, Garuda is no ordinary entity. He's a great devotee, great enough to be the carrier of Lord Vishnu. But Saubhari Muni tried to inhibit Garuda from getting fish because Saubhari Muni was somehow attached to the fish. These are my friends, and I'm underwater all the time, and who is Garuda to come here and stir things up? So because of that offense to Garuda, by trying to impede a Vaishnava, Saubhari Muni was spiritually weak. This is a good lesson for all of us. We should be very careful in our devotee relationships. We should be very careful in our relationships with any living entity, but especially other devotees. We shouldn't maintain grudges and grievances and, what to speak of, perpetuate any kind of harsh dealings. Saubhari Muni teaches us that lesson. He was weakened by offending a Vaishnava. And so, just by seeing two fish copulating, Saubhari Muni became disturbed. And he came out of the water. He came out of the water to seek a partner, as they say today. I notice these days, people don't say, oh, I'm lonely. They just say, it's time for me to have a relationship. No one admits weaknesses. No one admits dependencies. Just let me be with someone. Saubhari Muni came out of the water seeking a suitable wife. And so he went to King Mandaka, who had 50 daughters. It's not that Saubhari Muni went out on the street or just went to a party or something and who can I hook up with? You never know. It could be the right one. No, that's the way it's done today. You're bored, you have to do something with your body, so you hook up and you say, well, you never know, it could work out, it could be a long-term thing, but if it's not, so what? It's something to do for the weekend. No, Saubhari Muni was not thinking like that. He did the right thing the right way, even though his situation was born of some errors he made. He went to the king. Because Kshatriyas, Vedic administrators and warriors, are always supposed to give charity to the sadhus. So Saubhari Muni is thinking, well, you've got 50 daughters. I'm a powerful brahmana, sage, mystic yogi. Please give me one of your daughters in charity. The king gave a very tactful reply, because the king knows that you've got to be careful dealing with these mystic yogis. He's a brahmana, you don't want to offend them. At the same time, the king is thinking, I don't know if my daughter's going to want someone who's spent their whole life underwater and looks like it and smells like it. So what was the king's very strategic response? After all, he's a Kshatriya, he's chief executive, he knows how to be political. So he gave Saubhari Muni a political response. Oh, Brahmana, any of my daughters may accept any husband according to her personal selection. In other words, it's all up to my daughters. That's a strategic way of saying, The king knows. None of my daughters are going to want this withered old man who looks like he's been underwater for centuries. No. But the king puts it off on his daughters. They can have whoever they want. If one of them wants you, fine. So that's as good as saying no. Saubhari Muni got the hint. So then we go to the next verse. Saubhari Muni, he took stock of himself, and the way I look now is not going to get the job done. He thought, I'm now feeble because of old age. My hair has become gray. My skin is slack, and my head always trembles. Besides, I am a yogi, therefore women do not like me. Since the king has thus rejected me, I shall reform my body in such a way as to be desirable even to celestial women. What to speak of the daughters of worldly kings? He's going to change his body by his mystic power. You can't do that. You might consider plastic surgery or silicone implants or what do they call facelifts, or is that what they call facelifts? But Saubhari Muni had mystic power. He could change his whole body. Now, what a waste of mystic power accumulated through so many austerities. What a waste. Why not use his austerity to develop the ability to get out of the material world and become attached to Krishna? But he was weak from his offense to Garuda, and his bhakti life was feeble, and he wasn't coping with his desires properly by connecting them to Krishna's service. So therefore he misused his mystic power. The greatest mystic power is to get out of illusion. You know Srila Prabhupada's classic answer when, especially in India, news reporters would ask him, well, can you show us some mystic power? Because people in India are accustomed to sages and sadhus having some ability to produce a little speck of gold out of nowhere. So Srila Prabhupada's classic response was, you want to see my mystic power? I can take someone addicted to illicit sex, intoxication, meeting, and gambling, and transform them into a first-class bhakti yogi. That's my mystic power. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Dehinosmin yata dehe, komaram yoganam jara. You change bodies, infancy to youth, adulthood, old age, and then death. That's happening by the control of nature. But Saubhari Muni's mystic power was such that he could change how nature is acting upon him. But he didn't have the mystic ability to get out of material nature. That is the greatest technology. How to get out of material nature, out of its grip, and attach yourself to Krishna. So he did a whole body change just by his mystic technology. Now what happens when he goes back to the palace, to Mandata's palace? He's now looking young and beautiful. He's got a body, as he himself said, it's going to be a body that even the heavenly planet ladies are going to want me. What to speak of daughters of earthly kings. This is the way his life is developing. This is the direction his life is moving in. So now, young and beautiful, he approaches the palace, and the king's assistant takes him right inside the residential quarters of the princesses. In Vedic civilization, the daughters of the king have their own section of the palace, and not anybody can just walk right in. It's a bit different from parenting today. But Saubhari Muni is looking so young and beautiful and qualified that the king's assistant just said, wow, I'm going to take you right into the king's daughter's residential quarters because you look like you're really saying something. That's how stunning Saubhari Muni now looks. So the king's assistant knows that this is going to be a stir in the ashram. So what happened then? There were 50 daughters. All of them said, he's the one for me. He's just one man, but all 50 were vying for him. So, the Bhagavatam describes that being attracted by Saubhari Muni, the princesses gave up their sisterly relationship and quarreled among themselves, each one of them contending, this man is just suitable for me and not for you. In this way, there was a great disagreement. This is the way it is for any gender in terms of dealing with potential for gratification. There must be conflict. So those of you who are dreaming about world peace should know it'll never happen until first the desire for material enjoyment is curtailed, regulated, and put in its place. Because as soon as you desire materially, there must be some conflict. Someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. You get what you want. What does that mean on the material platform? Someone doesn't get it. That's the way material existence works. Your gain is always someone's loss. Your good times are at the expense of someone else. Thoughtful persons today are trying to calculate their happiness footprint, just like they think about their ecological footprint. Similarly, they think about their happiness footprint. The things that I'm doing, buying, acquiring, are causing some kind of negative impact for others. Let me try to see how I can live in a way that minimizes my happiness footprint. This is a bigger way, a bigger picture of dealing with existence than just the ecological footprint. In our endeavors to be happy, which everyone is trying to do in some small or big way, we're causing waves. And therefore there has to be conflict. Someone's getting, you're not getting. You have a nice be sure someone else is thinking, oh, if it was only me, if I had that person. That's the way it is with material existence. You can't get away from this on the material platform. Therefore, there cannot be material peace. You can't make a truce. You can't make a treaty. There's always agitation in the atmosphere because as soon as there's material desire, there's turbulence. Even the material mode of goodness is not pure, and therefore there are waves sometimes. And the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are always competing with each other. Sometimes one is predominant, sometimes the other is predominant, by the arrangement of time. So you've got your agitated mind and senses causing conflict, and you've got the modes of material nature causing conflict. So from within and without, there's turbulence. What are you going to do about it? So similarly, in this case, the princesses, they took one look at the new Saubhari Muni version 2.0, and they forget all about this sisterhood stuff. This man is for me, and this man is not for you. So again, that same attitude affects everyone. Male, female, young, old, this ethnicity, this nationality, whatever. Unless there's a program for teaching people how to control their mind and senses, there can't be any peace. Because their uncontrolled mind and senses will always lead to creating conflict. But we take it as innocent. I just want this, and I just want that. What's the problem? Others are having it. Why not me? Material desires always cause a problem. And this is a big lesson for us to learn. Why? Because the illusory energy makes the fulfillment of material desires impossible. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. It's like a blockage in our vision. We can't see, although we've experienced disappointment and frustration so many times before. When we encounter new situations, we just can't see. It looks like, yeah, this could work. Yes. I think this would kind of be interesting. And this could be kind of nice. And you forget that you've been through this in countless lifetimes. It's the same thing. As Prahlad Maharaj says, Puna Puna Charvana Charvana. Chewing that which has already been chewed. But we can't see that when we contemplate the objects of the senses. What's blocking our vision? You can't see through the ruse, the hoax. You can't see it. Because it's illusory energy. You're being prevented from seeing. Like in a 4-step series, you see step 1, step 2, step 3, but you can't see step 4. No matter how many times you've experienced. It's amazing. You tell yourself, oh, I'll never do that again. Same old, same thing. And there you go. Once again. Because the illusory energy conjures up a new package. It looks like a new package. This will be different. You know better now. You'll be able to handle yourself. But then when it's too late, you realize it's the same old song. So this is the power of Krishna's illusory energy. And this is why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Daivi Esha Gunamai Momaya Duratyaya Mameve Prapajante Mayam Etam Tarantite. This illusory energy of mine is impossible for you to cope with. You can't see through it. It blinds you. while making you think that you're so competent and expert and experienced. The only way you can handle this illusory energy is by doing things Krishna's way. Mamemi prapadyante mayamitam tarantite. So we have this pride and arrogance I've mentioned before. Pride and arrogance doesn't simply mean I am great. To be conceited. Pride and arrogance, in terms of its foundation, means I believe my body and senses will give me pleasure. That is pride. So we can catch this in us when we start acting on that assumption. My body, my senses will bring me enjoyment, gratification, and fulfillment. That's pride. That's arrogance. Everyone fails doing this, still I'm going to try. So what does Shukadeva Goswami explain in the beginning of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam? Pashyanapi na pashyati. You're sufficiently experienced, but still you do not see. Your eyes are open, but you actually don't see what's going on. How we're hallucinating, how we're misled, how we're gypped. We don't see the hoax. And therefore people think that it's possible to have world peace and contentment on the material platform. Impossible, because the material platform is turbulent by the arrangement of the modes of material nature, trigunamai, and also by the outcome of our uncontrolled mind and senses. So we've got turbulence within and turbulence without. And then we think there'll be world peace, there'll be tranquility, nations will work together and live together. And here you have people saturated by the bodily consciousness. I am this body. And you expect peace? By taking shelter of the body, which is an illusion, you're wide open to faulty vision and dissatisfaction because you've taken shelter of something that you're not. So how can there be peace and tranquility? I've given this example before. If we tell Munichar, we want you to jump up and touch your head to the ceiling here, or at least try, and you're going to feel happy. You say, that's nuts. How's it going to make me happy? But this is how we look at the material energy and material fulfillment. It will do something for me. What's underneath our hang-up is the desire to imitate Krishna as a supreme enjoyer. We want our own pastimes, our own pleasure pastimes. We want bodily gratification to work out. We want mental gratification to work out. And there can never be peace when you have a population suffering from those afflictions. So don't just put it all on the princesses, arguing, he's for me. No, he's for me. He's not for you, he's for me. This is the way it is for all living entities in material existence. So what did Saubhari Muni end up doing? They all wanted him. He had the mystic power to be able to maintain all 50 princesses. You can see these days it's so difficult just to maintain one, but 50? Saubhari Muni used his mystic power in that way. First, to transform his body, he changed his whole body, showing you the body is external, the soul is eternal. And then secondly, with his mantra chanting, he created an opulent palatial home, garments, ornaments, maid servants and manservants, varieties of parks with clear water lakes and gardens. In the gardens, fragrant with varieties of flowers, birds chirped, two birds, and bees hummed, surrounded by professional singers. Oh, just think you're home. Saubhari Muni's home was amply provided with valuable beds, seats, macro carpet, ornaments, and arrangements for bathing. And there were varieties of sandalwood creams, flower garlands, and palatable dishes. Thus surrounded by opulent paraphernalia, the Muni engaged in family affairs with his numerous wives. So this is what he's doing with the power he developed from his severe austerities. You can get material opulence, Srila Prabhupada explains in purport, by the regular material means, get a job, spend money, or you can also do it by yogic power. But what's the end result's the same, material gratification. So Saubhari Muni created these facilities for his high maintenance wives through mantra chanting. But obviously that is not the perfection of life. What you're going to see is that he's got everything. He's a man with everything. But he will not be satisfied. And that is what is so striking about this history of Saubhari Muni. He was very dissatisfied. And ultimately, he's going to walk away from it all. How could he do that? Would you walk away from all that? But he had some intelligence left due to his austerities. So he did, down the road, regather himself. But for now, he's teaching a very important lesson. His opulence was so great that King Mandata, the father of the 50 princesses, was struck with wonder and made to look very inconsequential because Saubhari Muni's opulence was so great. So when Mandata looked at the household opulence of Saubhari Muni, he felt so tiny. This is the way it is with the pursuit of material opulence on whatever level. Someone always has more than you. And you always think the grass is green on the other side. Someone has it better. Someone has a prettier wife. Someone has better saris. Someone's house is bigger and better. It's always going on and on and on and on, because that's the nature of the mode of passion. There's no resting point. There's no resting place in the mode of passion. It's always churning with desire and then dissatisfaction. When I'm speaking at universities, I often explain one statistic that has been calculated by behavioral economists. For every dollar that your income increases, your wants increase by $1.40. So you never are satisfied. If your income increases to $100,000 a year, your desires go up to $140,000 a year. There's no resting place. And especially you look around and see what others have. You may deny it, but still you're looking around. What do others have? Because so much of life is based on social comparison. So research has shown that, let's say you're making $50,000 a year, and then your salary is doubled. Oh, how great that would be, right? Your purchasing power has doubled. So you're feeling temporarily pretty good. My consumerism will double. I've got twice as much income. I used to be making $50,000 a year, now I'm making $100,000. Wow, how great is that? This lasts for a measurable amount of time, not forever. But it can, even that temporary burst of happiness is ended very quickly if, when you look around you, and even though your purchasing power is doubled, someone else is making $150,000. That pops your balloon. So if you were just around persons who are making 50 and you're making 100, then you feel very good about yourself. But someone walks in the room who's making 150,000, and then suddenly you're no longer so satisfied. This is how fickle the material mind is. Having an uncontrolled mind means you're victimized by all these crazy patterns. So Saubhari Muni had that kind of flash opulence, enough that even Mandata, the emperor of the world, felt small looking at the household opulence of Saubhari Muni. He felt, Mandata felt defeated. So we want to give you a picture tonight of the big desires, the big austerities, the big abilities, material abilities of Saubhari Muni. He had it all. 50 wives, princesses, 10 children from each of them. Why 10? Actually, it was 100. But what is the result going to be? By hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, you can learn without experiencing. Sometimes it's said that life is a very hard teacher. You get the test first and the lesson later. Therefore, people say hindsight is 20/20. You can look back and think, "Why did I do that?" No, I'll never do that again, although you will. So first comes the test, and then later you try to figure out the lesson. Whereas you think a normal educational process would be first you get the lesson and then the test. But life doesn't work that way. You're blinded. Therefore, as Shukadeva Goswami says, Pashyamapina Pashyati. You're sufficiently experienced, but you still don't see. And you can't see because that's the nature of the illusory energy. It blocks your vision. You see step 1, step 2, step 3, and you don't see what step 4 is. And it happens again and again and yet again. So King Mandata is minimized in his opulence, although he's a great devotee. So. But still, when he looks at his opulence compared to Saubhari Muni, he feels materially reduced. Well, what is Saubhari Muni's situation amidst all this opulence and desire power? He's got it made, right? The princesses have got it made too, right? Looks like everyone is on easy street with big money, big comfort. What does the Bhagavatam teach us? Text 47, rather, text 48. Evam griheshva bilato vishayan vividai sukai sevamano nachatusya ajya stokai avanalaha. In this way, Saubhari Muni enjoyed sense gratification in the material world, but he was not at all satisfied. Just as a fire never ceases blazing if constantly supplied with drops of fat. You know, blazing fire, you can see at initiation yajnas, the fire is there and you drop some ghee onto the fire. The fire will not cease blazing as you keep pouring the ghee on it. You want the fire to go out, you've got to stop pouring ghee on it. So, Srila Prabhupada's purport tells us that material desire is just like a blazing fire. If a fire is continually supplied with drops of fat, the fire will increase more and more and never be extinguished. Therefore, the policy of trying to satisfy material desires by catering to one's material demands will never be successful. Never be successful. So we want to prove that to ourselves, right? We're going to be the exceptions, right? We're going to drop fat on the fire constantly, and yet we expect the fire to be peaceful. And then when there's a huge blaze, we're astonished. And we tell ourselves, all I was doing was trying to be happy. Why did I get this reaction? I was just trying to be happy. And deluded, we think, if I just put some drops on the fire will be content. If I just indulge materially, the desire will go away. Just like if you drop ghee on the fire will just, it won't get bigger, it'll probably go out. This is how we hallucinate. Of course, the reality is trying to satisfy material desires by surrendering to material demands will never be successful. So what is the contemporary equivalent of dropping fat on the fire? It's economic expansion. Economic expansion is an organized way for simply dropping fat on the fire. Or another way of looking at economic expansion is it's lust on an organized scale. There's individual lust, and then there's societal lust, known as economic expansion. So when people are talking about the economy, just like here in New Zealand, some economists say that last year wasn't as bad as everyone expected, but maybe this year will be the bad year. But everyone's always concerned, the economy. There's your personal sense gratification, and there's the economy. We want both to be pumping, both to be vibrant, dynamic. But both are simply different ways of expressing lust. There's individual expression, there's societal expression. And both attempts will never be satisfied. So we need to know what real satisfaction is, and that's why we need opportunities for engaging in devotional service. We finally start to encounter real satisfaction by engaging in the processes of bhakti. Because those processes are what the soul wants. What our non-material self wants. So tomorrow we'll continue with hearing about Saubhari Muni's self-reflection. He began to consider his situation. Amidst all this opulence and enjoyment, he's going to backtrack and wonder, wait a minute, I seem to have lost the plot. It happens sometimes in our spiritual life. We can feel that. I got off track a bit. Maybe just a little bit, maybe a lot. I have to do a reevaluation. That can happen if you keep good association. You look around and see others are more serious, they're more peaceful, they're less under the control of the modes of material nature, and you start thinking, what happened to me? So the ability to do a double take on yourself, to put yourself under your own microscope and look at yourself, very important in bhakti. To have that kind of reflective intelligence comes from having studied Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Your intelligence becomes spiritualized, so that even if you become overwhelmed by circumstances, even if you slip a bit because of being weak, that intelligence you've developed starts to poke you. Hey, you've done better than this. It is possible. And if you're in good association, you become inspired by what others are doing. And you get yourself back on track. So we'll hear tomorrow about Saubhari Muni, his self-reflection, and how he's going to straighten himself out. But today we want to meditate on his conclusion, his profound and universal conclusion. His indulgences did not satisfy him, although he had the best, brought about by his mystic power. He had the best opulence, the most beautiful wives, he had everything, palatial homes, parks and gardens. But he could not get any peace. And although he tried to satisfy his desires, thinking in that way the desire will go away, instead the opposite always happens. The desire increases. The example given by Prahlad Maharaj about scratching an itch. It seems so natural. You get bitten by a mosquito, it seems so natural to scratch it. To scratch the bite. And what do you always tell yourself? Do they have mosquitoes in Ottawa?
Absolutely.
What do you tell yourself when you've been bitten?
Not to scratch it,
Why?
because it makes it worse.
Yes, you tell yourself not to scratch it because the itch gets worse. But what do you end up doing?
Scratch it.
You ever think about that? So that is the mystery of Maya, the material illusion. We're sufficiently experienced. If I scratch, it's just going to get worse. I'm not going to do it. Just one time only. I think that'll be it. I'll be satisfied. Believe me, just one time. You scratch. And then, well, I already did it one time. How about one more time? This is how the illusory energy operates. It's like you can't see the end of the series of steps. The 4-step process, you only see step 1, step 2, step 3. Again and again, you're fooled and befuddled. You can't see what the outcome is. It's this. The outcome is the same old, same thing. I thought about it. You just can't see it materially. There's something that's such a powerful energy that's blocking your vision. But by hearing from Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, you can see through this illusion. Otherwise, no. By material methods, by experience, no. It's too much. The Saubhari Muni will end up, after his deliberation, he'll end up making some major adjustments to